Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate a win for American farmers, ranchers, and agriculture producers. Fertilizer prices have been skyrocketing for over a year now, and with the cost of urea ammonium nitrate in particular rising at record highs. Since March, I have been urging the U.S. International Trade Commission to suspend duties on UAN imports from Trinidad and Tobago, and this week they did just that. On July 18th, the U.S. International Trade Commission rejected imposing final duties on urea ammonium nitrate, UAN, in its determination that anti-dumping activities surrounding UAN fertilizers in Trinidad and Tobago did not harm the U.S. fertilizer industry. With this determination, the ITC has finally responded to my 3 letters dating back to March, the legislation that I introduced in that same month, and my testimony before them.
The progressive wing of the Democratic Party, as well as Chuck Schumer and Warnock, who faces a tough re-election bid this fall, were among those pushing for Biden to forgive $50,000 per borrower. Throughout the public and private pressure campaign, the White House has touted its efforts to help with student loan debt through its work with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness and the Income-Driven Repayment Programs. Shocking news, everybody. President Biden will be announcing his brand new plan to help millions of Americans financially. Lawmakers in the House and Senate are now meeting to discuss the future stimulus package. Some GOP lawmakers are insistent that this relief be more targeted. And now, here's some exciting news. Biden has said today to announce that he will forgive $10,000 in student loan debt for millions of borrowers who fall below an income cap. After weighing executive action for months, the president is expected to reveal his long-awaited decision. The action is also expected to include extending until January a moratorium on federal student loan payments, which was implemented during the crisis, set to expire at the end of this month. Biden has said he will make a decision by August 31st, and Biden faces increasing pressure from progressive Democrats to cancel an even larger share of debt for Americans who took federal loans to pay for college. Some Democratic economists, including Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, worry about the risk of debt cancellation exacerbating 40-year high inflation. But the White House has zeroed in on a plan that would cancel $10,000 in student loan debt per eligible borrower, according to sources at least, matching a figure that Biden campaigned on. The White House has also discussed expanding relief beyond $10,000 for borrowers who meet certain criteria. The debt cancellation will be limited to borrowers with family incomes of $125,000 or less, and would apply only to people with federal loans, not private ones. More than 43 million people have federal student loan debt in the United States, and the average borrower has about $37,000. According to data compiled by the Education Data Initiative, the outstanding federal loan debt is about $1.6 trillion. Biden said in April that he was taking a hard look at executive action to forgive federal student loan debt, chief among the White House considerations in the months that followed. The possible impact on inflation that has soared throughout the year. Canceling potentially up to $10,000 in student loan debt would mean billions more collectively staying in the pockets of Americans. Some critics argue the extra money for consumers to spend risk stoking demand and further accelerating historic inflation. Biden's approval rating rose this week to its highest level since June. A new poll found that 41% of Americans approve of Biden's job performance. It was his first time above 40% since early June. In 4 of the last 5 weeks, Biden's rating rose as the Democratic-controlled Congress passed a large piece of legislation to fight climate change and lower prescription prices. Now some states are changing their minds on the next round of relief. Recently, John Velas was about lawmakers' decision to scrap the stimulus checks which were promised to middle-income residents.
Reserves, the gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Pleased to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia who has had a profound influence on this legislation and knows it inside and out. Mr. Beyer for 1.5 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today we protect the world for future generations. Madam Speaker, the Inflation Reduction Act will do untold good for the nation, for the American people. This is our generation's signature contribution to American history. Our Social Security Act, our Civil Rights Act, even the Bill of Rights. The act will lower healthcare costs, reduce prescription drug prices, and create jobs. We have emphatically put people over politics. Much like a proposal I introduced with Senators Warren and Angus King, it will actually reduce the deficit by preventing tax avoidance for the biggest corporations in this country, requiring them to shoulder their fair burden of the tax responsibility. Most importantly, the Congress is finally taking the sweeping, ambitious action we desperately need to prevent the worst effects of climate change. We're passing the most important environmental bill in history. I'm privileged to serve on Chairman Neal's brilliant Enlightened Ways and Means Committee, and I'm proud of the diverse tax credit provisions I partnered with many distinguished members and friends. These are the parts of the act which will have enormous climate consequences. They'll accelerate the adoption of zero-emission mid-sized trucks, vans, and other commercial vehicles. They'll scale up direct air capture technology to remove carbon pollution directly from the atmosphere. They'll promote the development of green hydrogen, and they'll incentivize the reduction of emissions in commercial buildings. These provisions and the bill as a whole will create huge numbers of good-paying jobs.
Director, you a number of times said you have a complex organization, and I don't doubt that. I don't think the chairman doubts that. When you have a complex organization, you need reporting mechanisms in place to hold people accountable. I think what I find most troubling in here is the fact that there weren't those reporting systems in place. Apparently it's just structural, that these regional directors or these divisions are kind of fiefdoms of their own and apparently don't seem like they're responsible for reporting to the director at all. That's a real problem. I think that the whole purpose of oversight is to understand what's happening, where the breakdowns are occurring so we can fix it. So, first of all, do you agree with that assessment that there just simply wasn't the reporting mechanism that you could, these reports be written, and I know the August 31st, 2020 report that I've been referring to, that's a memorandum for the regional director of the Southeast region. But again, something with those types of revelations, it ought to just automatically go up to the top. Again, when I ran an organization, I was always tell the people who reported to me, don't be making decisions that I really need to be aware of, that I need to be making that decision. Don't take that responsibility onto yourself. That's the whole job of being the boss, to get the tough ones, to hear the really bad news that needs to be corrected. So again, just to tie into what the chairman's been talking about, I mean, is your testimony that you were just literally completely out of the loop of all these reports to these regional divisions, and that's the way the system's supposed to work?
No, Senator, and I agree that that's one of the challenges. We've taken steps to look at reorganization or looking at this. I think we've been stuck in a silo. I believe that's what some of these breakdowns occurred. We put a lot of trust in our senior level. These are senior executive service members at the top of the leadership. They have delineated authority, and we expect them to use that good judgment.
But listen, in any organization, you delineate authority. But the person in charge, the people in charge, again, it's not just you, it's the Attorney General. It's people who serve in the Department of Justice. I wanted one follow-up question. You did, in response to